All right, then as we continue on, I'm going to back up now to where we were before. And what I'm going to do, whether this is good or bad, right or wrong, we're going to find out. But I'm going to quickly walk you over what we're going to do next, basically what's in the rest of the chapter. Then we're going to try to do it as a group. All right, so the author says here, this is the bottom of page 71. The left button is in the right place, but the label and the other button are not. And they say that back in Chapter 2, and I've taped that one, but in Chapter 2, your whole, what they did in Chapter 2 was this. They had you try to find right in the middle of the screen and put in there hello world. All right, then you ran it, you found out it really wasn't in the middle of the screen. Okay, it was more like, maybe like that. Okay, so in that case, what they said was, well, you can kind of cheese out. You went into one of the inspectors, and basically you went in there and you switched off the size classes in the storyboard. When you did, it showed you how it really looks, and then you could come back in and center it the right way. Okay? So the author says that'll work, but it's very limited in its application in that it only works for whatever you have up there right now. In other words, for your simulator, whatever version you're using. All right? And it may work fine in portrait and not work in landscape. And the author says for sure that's designed to work with the single iPhone class you're using. That won't work in iPads. So in other words, even though you can do that, that's not the right way to do this. All right? It'll work for an unbelievably simple app that's not going to do much. All right. So the author says what we want to do here, and again, we're trying it now and hopefully it'll work, is auto layout. And as mentioned here on the very bottom of the page, the author shows you this and says, well, what do we want? Let's just think about for a second what we want. We want the left button, so let's go back to where we were, should be vertically. That always looks great on my hand when I go home. So what we want is we want the left button to be vertically centered and close to the right margin of the screen. So basically it should be down here someplace. And the right, similar but on the right. And then the label that says, for example, right, and that, again, that'll be bolded, button, pressed. So that's what we want. That's what the author is saying right there. All right? So what we have to do is we have to set up what are called constraints to do that. I'm going to quickly show you how they do it in the book in just a minute, but then afterwards I'm going to show you another way to do it that's not in the book. All right? So, on page 72, what the author tells us that we're going to do in just a minute, and we will do it, we will, in just a minute, all right, is the author says, I don't know how I got up to 200% here, but I did, so there we go. All right. The author says to fix this, what we're going to end up doing, and I just want to show it to you. Again, I'm trying to walk you through this before we do it. Will that help? I don't know. But that's the way I've decided to do it regardless. All right? Is we're going to come out into, remember that button that's down here that brings up that outliner? The thing that comes up in here and it's got all the stuff that you've got in there? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to click that so this shows. Then we're going to take our, what is it, the label first? One of them, we're going to drag it up into there. All right? And again, if I confused you, it's on the top of page 72. The author says it's the document outline. So what we want to do is we want to click that button down here, which will bring up our outline up here. All right? I'm trying to move that back up, but when I do, it just flips off the page. See, it either goes too high or too low. All right. And what we'll want to do when we do that is we'll want to set two constraints that come up in this black box right here. Since we want to set two constraints, we'll want to hold down on the Shift key and click each constraint. If you just click one, it'll only set one constraint. So you want to hold down on Shift so you can click both of them. Again, I'll show it to you in just a second. All right. Then on page 73, the author says, by dragging from one view to the other, you are telling Interface Builder you want to apply auto layout constraint between them. So after we do that, I'll show you another way of doing it. All right? Then on page 74, the author talks about this. Please look up on the screen here. All right, and where are they? Well, you can't see them all in here. I'm going to have to switch back into the code. So a couple of things. First of all, when you look up on the screen here, this is that document outliner that they're talking about, all right, on the page. That button down there will either turn it on or turn it off. What they'll want you to do is take your mouse, if you look right here, and literally do a control drag from here up to the word view. When you do that, it's going to bring up a box that has constraints in it. You'll want to choose two of those constraints. Since you want to choose them both, you hold down on your Shift key, click one, then the other. The order in which you click them doesn't matter. All right, then if you please all look up on the screen here, because this is the key part. These are the four things that the rest of the chapter is about, right here. All right, one of this is alignment. This one's a pin, so alignment and pin. This one is resolve all layout issues, and for the life of me, I can't remember right now what that last one is, but we'll get to it. The point is this. When you start making these changes, what's going to happen on the screen, it's going to start literally trying to move some stuff around for you to try to constrain it the way you set it up. And what will happen is it'll say, oh, I'll do this, and it'll do that. But then what that will do is it'll increase some ambiguity. And what I mean is, you might say, well, I want to move this as far right as I can. But then the system may be confused. Well, how far down or up do you want it, type of thing. All right? And sometimes when you do that, you can just click that third button, which is to resolve layout issues, and choose update frames, and boom, it'll fix everything. Not always. All right? And so again, we'll go over this in just a second, but I'm just running you through what's going on here. All right, the last one stands for resizing behavior. So if you didn't like my description, on the bottom of page 74 and the top of page 75, they explain in depth what each one of those buttons is. All right? Much more depth than I just did. And they talk about the update frames. So we're going to run through the steps that are here in just a second. The only other thing that I want to say to you, if everybody would please look up on the screen here. All right? So I come back in here, there's my storyboard, boom, 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 all right? And you may or may not have noticed this, that if I click right here, all right, did you see where I clicked? I clicked up here where I've got that little insignia. If I go down and I choose preview, okay, what it should do is bring up yet another window here that kind of takes a snapshot of the way my app currently looks if I were to run it right now. That's called preview mode. This is something that's new with Xcode 6. All right? And they show you how to do it there on pages 79 on the bottom of the page, and it goes on to page 80 and even into 81. All right? And then on page 82, they talk about that code that we added to make the stuff bold and what all that stuff is. The reason I'm telling you that, the reason I did it like this is what I want to concentrate on between now and the end of the period here is the stuff in the book here on pages 71 through about the middle of page 79, all the auto layout stuff. And I'm hoping, again, over against hope, that it all works. All right? So, I'm already explained to you on 71 what we want to do as far as what kind of constraints we want to set up. So I'm changing here to page 72. All right? The author says each of the preceding statements, moving the left thing, moving the right thing, the two buttons in the label, each contains two constraints, one for the horizontal constraint, the other for a vertical constraint. It says if we apply these constraints to our three views, auto layout will take care of positioning them correctly. So how do we do that? So the author says you can do it in code. Sometimes you have to do it in code because the layout that you want is so intricate that it may be that you literally, to get it exactly where you want it to go, you may have to do it that way. And the author says that in that second paragraph on page 72. That's fine. But he says here on the third paragraph down on page 72, we'll start by positioning the label. Select the main storyboard in the project navigator and open the document outline. Again, the document outline is right here. There it is. All right. So if we don't want it, we can click the button there. Come on. And it goes away. Then we can click it again over here and make it come back again. All right. Hopefully by now, just going over that makes enough sense to people. We don't have to say that again. So I'm going to click it to make it appear. All right. So we want it there. Again, I'm following what's in the third paragraph on page 72 and the picture. So if you have your PDF up on your Intel machine, you'll be fine. Otherwise, just follow along. So it says select main storyboard and open it document outline to show the view hierarchy. Find the icon named view. So if you click right here, notice what happens. Everything gets highlighted. It's showing you that's what's contained in the entire view. Everybody hear that? Okay. Now, did we have to do that? No. All right. So the author says, it says, find the icon named view. This represents the controller's main view. So sometimes what the author is showing you is if you look right here, where I'm making the mouse go crazy here, sometimes it's going to look like this. And if it does, as always, just do that and it'll open it. Boom. All right. So it shows you everything that's in there. All right. So it says we want to hold down on the control key and drag from this label that's right here. I'm not going to do it yet, but I'm going to hold down on control, drag from there to here. Does that make sense? I'm not saying, why would you do it that way? I didn't make up this language, but does what we're doing make sense? So I'm going to hold down on control and click drag from the label. Oops. And sometimes it's a pain in the butt to do that. And I'm dragging up to view and letting go. Now, what you see here should be the same thing that you see in the book, all right, that you see in the book in the black box on page 72. If I did it too fast or you didn't see it, again, click on the label to highlight it, hold down on the control key, hold down on the mouse, and drag up to where it says view. And again, you'll get the little bit of a blue like we did when we were wiring stuff up. All right, so that gets us through page 72. Page 73, by dragging from one view to the other, you're telling Interface Builder you want to apply this auto layout constraint between them. Release the mouse and the gray pop-up button appears with what's shown in 315. It's already up there, so you can see it. All right. So the author says you can click anything that you want on there, but we know we have two constraints we need to apply, and both are available in the pop-up. Since we want to apply more than one, make sure that before you click either one of these, hold down on your Shift key. All right? So I'm holding down on Shift, and I'm first going to click, I'm going to do it in the order they show it, center horizontally in container, and then top space to top layout guide. So those two should be highlighted. And if you just hit enter or you move off of there and click, it'll apply the constraint. Can you see up here? I know this is kind of hard to see, but what you're going to notice in just a minute is you're going to see constraints have been made in here where you don't see them right now. All right? So I'm just going to click off of this. All right, and now if you notice, that's what it's told me, is it just made these two constraints for me. There are other ways that you can do this. They explain some of the other ways in the book. All right, just so you know, some of the other ways you can do it are explained in the book, and some of the rest you just have to learn through experience or trial and error or whatever. All right. So that gets us through page 72 and into page 73. All right. So again, to apply the constraints, click the mouse button anywhere outside of the pop-up. When you do this, the constraints you've created appear under the heading Constraints. That's what I already showed you. All right. Now notice on the very bottom of page 73, I'm just reading this verbatim. This is a tip by the author. If you make a mistake when adding a constraint, take your mouse, put it on that constraint, and then just click the delete key. Did you hear what I said? You're not changing anything. But if you meant to, if you applied the wrong constraint or whatever, that's the easiest way. Because sometimes people, oh, I better get rid of that control and re-put it in. It's not the control that's wrong, it's the constraint that's wrong. All right, page 74. The author says here, the two vertical blue lines, okay? The good news is when you see blue, if you look up on the screen here, blue means good. Orange means bad. So there's something that's wrong here as far as the system is concerned. Not that you did anything wrong, but as far as the system is concerned with trying to set up these constraints, it's confused. All right? Now, please look, because this is not in your book, I don't believe. If you look up on the screen here, see that little triangle that's up here? See that? Everybody see that? It's a circle, but it's supposed to have a little triangle in it. It's yellow. You take your mouse and you click there, it's telling you right now what it doesn't understand. All right? So basically, and we're not going to change anything from there, but just so you see it, if I click right here, it's right to the right of where it says View Controller Scene. If I click there, it says, hey, this is what I expected, and that's not what you're giving me. All right, so it's trying to let you know. Okay, and I'm going to just click the arrow to go back again, but I just wanted to show you that that was there because I don't believe they mentioned that in the book. All right. So it says Interface Builder uses orange to indicate an auto layout problem. There are typically three problems that you'll have that the Interface Builder will come up with. One, you don't have enough constraints to specify a view's full position and size. Two, the view has constraints that are ambiguous. All right, it doesn't understand something. Three, the constraints are correct, but the position and or size of the view at runtime won't be the same as it is in Interface Builder. Oh, then they do mention you can find out more by clicking that yellow warning thing. Okay, fine. Now, on the bottom of page 74, they explain again what these four buttons over here are. All right, right to the left of your object inspector. These four buttons right here. And it says first, the align button lets you align the selected view relative to another view. All right, it says if you click this now, you'll see a pop-up. And one of the things that's in there is horizontal, center, and view. So the author is saying that's another way you could have set what we just set. Okay, just so you know, that's yet another way we could have done this. Next week, or not next week, Thursday, I'm going to show you yet another way you could do it. All right, not to confuse you, but sometimes when you see 3 or 4 ways, one of them totally makes sense to you, and the rest confuse you. All right, but as I go on, I'm not going to keep saying, hey, let's do this way, and let's do this way, and I'm not going to do that. All right, the second one that's there. So again, this is the align right here. The second one, as it says, that's the pop-up for the pin. We're going to look at that in just a minute. All right, that one, this is me speaking. You may not agree. I find that one the most confusing. You'll see it in just a minute, but that's the one you might look at it and go, no, that one makes sense. Then by all means use that. All right. The third one, that's the resolve auto layout issues. All right, as it says, it lets you correct layout problems. You can use the menu, and that's the one, that's the down and dirty, cheap way to try to get stuff to work as soon as possible. And the last one, as it says, the resizing behavior button, the last one, lets you control the effect of resizing on existing constraints. All right? So the author says we can fix the problem we're having with the label right now by clicking the third button, which is the Resolve Auto Layout Constraints. All right, so with that, make sure that that's highlighted, and then click this third button that's right here. And notice what the author shows you, or what the book shows you, and what comes up on the screen. All right? You'll notice here, you get almost the same stuff. One of them's grayed out here, but it's almost the same stuff. And what you're saying here, if you look up on the screen, because this is kind of important, this says, do you want to apply this just to what's highlighted, or do you want to apply this to everything? So if you wanted to try to resolve issues one at a time, you'd probably go this way. If you wanted to resolve all of them at a time, you'd probably go that way. Does that make sense? All right. And this is, again, what the author is saying here on the bottom of page 75 in the book. All right. So again, if you select an operation from the top group, it applies only to the currently selected view, whereas in the bottom, it's all the views that are in the view controller. In this case, we just need to fix the frame for one label, so click Update Frames in the top part, the one that's right here. All right? And it's going to look like your label disappears. And in essence, it is. If that's what happens, if it looks like it goes like this with just a little bit on there, that's a good thing. And we'll get to why in just a second. All right, so I'm clicking it. All right, see what mine looks like now? The label's still there. And notice there's nothing in orange now. And you might say, well, why is it doing that? Because what we just told it with our constraints is make it only as big as it needs to be. What's in there right now? So as we start, we put in left button pressed or right button pressed, it'll expand as it needs to expand or contract. All right? Again, if you don't like my explanation, the author says here on page 76, can this be correct? Well, it turns out that this is correct. Many of the views UIKit provides, including the label, are capable of having auto layout set their size based on their content. They do this by calculating what's called their natural or intrinsic size. And then there's some more on it about that. All right? Okay, so I'm on the bottom of page 76, that bottom paragraph. And the author says here, now I've done this 3 or 4 times. I think I've done it 3 times. Twice I've gotten it to work and it looked just the way I thought it was supposed to look. The other time, I think I balled it up more than it was when I started. So hopefully this is going to be fine. So I'm on the bottom of page 76. It says we've taken care of the label. Now let's fix the position of the 2 buttons. It says we could use the same technique of control dragging from a button to the parent view and applying the constraints, but I'm going to take the opportunity to show you another way. Now, if you don't like the way they're doing that, if you go, no, that way you just did that makes sense, then do what they just did, but do them with the buttons instead of with a label. All right, but I'm going to follow the author here. It says select the left button. All right, so select the left button right here. And then the author says, then click the align button. Remember, that's the leftmost button over here. All right? And that's what should come up. And it's the same thing that you see on the top of page 77 in your book in figure 320. Okay? It says we want the button to be vertically centered, so we will select the vertical center in container. And please look up on the screen right here. Notice right now, all right, it says add constraints. And see how it's grayed out? Because there aren't any. As soon as we choose that, whatever it is, vertical center, it'll say add 1 constraint there. If we clicked a bunch of these, if we clicked all of them, and if there's 8 or 9 there, it would say add 9 constraints. That makes sense? All right, so this is yet another way that we can add constraints. All right, so according to this, we want the last one here, vertical center in container. And now it says add 1 constraint. All right, and then we should click where it says add 1 constraint, right there. All right, now that one's done. Now you'll notice we got some yellow stuff down here. All right, we'll worry about that in just a minute. Let's do the same thing with the right button. So we're going to click the right button. We're again going to come down and click align down here, and we're again going to choose vertical center in container. That's the same stuff That's the same stuff that you see in the paragraph that's right in the middle of the page on page 77 in the text. Again, when we run through this, if I'm going too fast, I'm sorry, but you've got the tape, and sometimes the best way to do this is to sit at home, build a project by yourself, and just play with it. When you say, Jeff, I don't have time to, none of us have time, all right? So it says, you may have noticed, we've got some orange outlines now in here. It says, if we click the triangle again, up here, it's telling us we've got some missing constraints. See that? I clicked up there and that triangle was red now. And it says left needs constraint, etc. Yours may not look like this. Depends on how you position stuff, if you move stuff around or whatever. All right? So it says Interface Builder is warning you that the horizontal positions of both buttons are ambiguous. In other words, the system doesn't really know exactly what it is you're trying to do. You've heard me say this before in other classes. All right, I've equated, as an example, I'm just going to cancel here. I've equated, when you do this, you know, fighting with the software for me is like fighting with my spouse. Doesn't matter how right I am, I'm wrong anyway. It's the same kind of an idea. If it's you against the software, you lose. All right? So if you look on page 78, which is where I am now, on the top, it says, while setting auto layout constraints, it's normal for you to get stuff in blue and have other stuff go orange and have stuff appear on the page. And it says, all right, if you follow the steps in here, it should work. The author says if for some reason it doesn't, well then by all means, please go back and please go back and let them know, okay? Now, I'm going to show you two things, okay? The author says now we want to fix this. So he says, let's fix these warnings. We want the left button to be a fixed distance away from the parent view and the right one to be the same from the parent view. So the author says we can select those constraints from the pop-up and the pin button. So they say here to literally click on the pin button. And remember, the pin button is, it's either the second or the third, I always forget. It's the second, right here. I think it's giving me this because I've still got that up. So let me try it now. Yep. All right. I don't like this. When I tried to follow the author's stuff, I tried putting his numbers in there, and I tried leaving his numbers in there and using my own, and it just kept getting hosed. Okay? So feel free to follow exactly what the author says on that page. What I'm going to do instead of that is I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to click on this. And you may or may not have seen it, but one of the things it says is, you want me to fix it? Yes. I'm going to let the system fix it. All right? So if you want to follow the steps that he's got in there, he explains this. I found this confusing. You may look through it and say, no, Jeff, it's not confusing. It makes more sense to me. But look at what they have here. All right? You're talking about its position. I want to make sure I've got my handout here because I want to give it to you correctly. I don't want to screw it up. This button right here, that's the control right there. This button right there, that represents your control. And this says, how do you want to constrain the control? Do you want to constrain it from the top, from the left, from the right, or from the bottom? Does that make sense? All right. Most of the time, depending on how you've got your stuff laid out, for instance, if I had a label on the top of the screen and I wanted to make sure it was always in a fixed location at the top, I'd be more concerned with that one. With what we're doing in here with the buttons, it's going to be these two. All right. It's probably going to be less often, it's going to be something like this. All right. So it says the 4 input fields let you set the distance between the button and its nearest neighbors. All right. It says below it, to the left, below it, to the right, and above it. All right? So it says in the case of the left button, we want to set a fixed distance between it and the left side of the parent view. It says, so click the dashed yellow line, which is right there, All right? And it says, we need to apply the same constraint to the right. Well, again, I had problems doing this. I tried following his steps, and when I did it 3 times, all right, at least once it didn't work. So I came back and did this, and it seemed to work better. I went back to here, I clicked on where it's got missing constraints, and it said add them, and I told it to. All right, then I went back over to here, and I told it fix that misplacement. And then I went back to here, and I said fix that one. So I told it what I wanted it to do. Now, look at the problem. All right, just to show you, okay, I'm going to sit there, and I'm going to do a file save, and I'm going to run the program. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but to me it's getting to the point where between Android and having to work with weight and padding and everything else, and this, it's almost just a lot easier to write the code than it is to make the frigging interface. All right? Okay, there's left. And it says right button pressed, because that right one's on top of it. You may or may not have noticed that, but that's the problem. All right? But you also may or may not have noticed that when I was doing all this, it added yet another constraint in here. Yeah, now it's barfing. Doesn't like something I'm doing. All right, so it's got another constraint up here. All right, so I'm going to click on that one. All right, now it says there's no layout issues, but there's still a problem. All right? Do you have any idea what the problem is? Anybody? Yeah, but you know why? Because doing it like this, as opposed to the other way I showed you, basically it set the same constraints up for both of them. You understand what I'm saying? Remember when you had that picture before? So I did all this, then I had to manually go in and use that pin and set it. All right? So I'm running you through the same trials and tribulations that I went through. So I went back to the right mouse button here. Okay, moved it over a little bit and dragged it so I was sure it was there, and then went back here to the pin and tried as best I could. And again, it was a lot of trial and error and a lot of other stuff. Clicked the wrong button, I'm sorry. To try to get that fixed. All right. Basically what you want to do is you want a left constraint. All right. And you want that left constraint, I think he says 32, but I don't remember. You want to click that one. And then for the right one, you want the right constraint to be over there. Does that make sense? All right. And if it doesn't, my guess is you haven't read the chapter. Okay? Yes.
Don't you need to flip the 32 over to the right side?
It's whatever it says in the book.
Because it's worked for here.
You got it to work?
Yeah, you put
Okay.
the 32 on the right.
Oh, yeah, for the right button.
For the right.
Okay.
So put the 32 on the right side.
Right here.
Yeah, and then whatever goes in.
And then you left the rest the way it was?
Yeah, then just click the right one.
Oh,
Right. You got to click here.
I don't think that. No, that 33 has to go on the left. Yeah, click, and then that 33 has to change.
these ones aren't active. It's only when you click that.
Yeah, the ones that are in the book, again, unless you laid it out exactly the way it was in the book. So this took a lot of time and trouble, trial and error. What I'll try to do, we're done. What I'll try to do is fix mine up and before class on Thursday, put it out there. All right? And on Thursday, the other thing I'm going to try to do is, again, fix my stuff so that on that guessing game, try to lay it out using an auto layout. And I'll explain to you what I did the first part of class. All right? I can't see teaching a class like this and meeting 4 hours and lecturing for 4 hours in a week, ever. You need some time to play with this stuff for it to make sense. All right? I didn't think this today would take that long, but I'd rather do that, and hopefully it made some sense to you, and I didn't screw you up at the end right there. All right? But I'll try to talk no more than a half an hour or so on Thursday, and then give you some time, all right, to try to start working on some of this stuff yourself. Plus, I want to show you another way you can do this.
Do negative 32 in the right constraint.
Right here?
Yeah, make it a right constraint.
I have to make, I don't know if I had that one chosen or not.
And I think originally we didn't put in the negative, but it threw it in there. Huh. I don't know.
Like I said, I ended up playing with this, like just doing all sorts of stuff to get it to work. All right, and I thought there's got to be an easier way of doing it than this. So I'm going to show you not exactly an easier way of doing it. We're gonna make an app next time. We can all do this. All right, we're going to start making that calculator next time. All right, and when we make the app, we're going to do this. So this is going to be our screen. And maybe it almost looks like we're going backwards instead of forwards, but we're going to put a 0 here inside of a label. You with me? We're going to put a 0 there in a label. And when we run the program, you're not going to see it. But then I'm going to show you what I consider to be the easiest way of constraining it, so it will be right there. And when we turn it, so that's portrait, so when we turn it landscape, it'll still be right there. All right, so we're going to do that. And then with this label, we're going to set this up so that as we type in numbers, so if I type, it'll have a 0 in there originally, but as I type in 123, it'll say 0, 1, 2, 3. Then we'll get rid of the 0. We'll talk about how to do that. Then we'll create all those buttons for the calculator. So we'll make like the 7 that goes here. All right, and then we'll copy it and name that 8, 9, what, 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 0. And we'll have that. And eventually what we'll want to do is we'll want to add the operators. But what I'll show you next time is how to fix that. So if I click that, then click that, then click that, that's what will show up. Does that make sense? All right. And we'll just pick it up from there.
Did you update? Update frames? Did you update your frames?
Did I update my frames? No.
Huh.
Good news is, in all seriousness, I have no issues. No, I'm serious. So I've solved all that stuff. The bad news is it's just a positional thing. I'm not going to worry about that.